This is Coffee with Kelly, a dynamic podcast that's dedicated to driving positive change in school safety. I'm your host, Ethan Woodman, Product Marketing Specialist for Crisis Go, and I'm joined by my esteemed colleague, Kelly Moore, Senior School Safety Specialist for Crisis Go. Our mission is to empower you with essential knowledge, tools, and inspiration required to foster a safer and more secure school environment. We hope this podcast will be the catalyst for transformation in your schools. Join us as we continue to dive into the world of school safety. Good morning, Kelly.
Good morning.
How are you doing?
Ethan, I'm well. Weather's a little gloomy in southwestern Virginia.
It's pretty humid out.
It is humid.
I was taking care of animals and it was getting hot. I turned on those air conditioners.
Yeah.
I'm like a 55, 60 degrees kind of guy. Anything above that, it's too warm.
I'd rather have it cold than hot, but
Yep.
I like it in the 60s. 60s is perfect for me. Low 70s, not so bad.
All right. So let's see. Let's start off with a couple articles.
Okie dokie.
So we're going to talk about this one was, I'm sure, seen by a lot of people around the nation because it kind of went viral. So in Tennessee, they had a graduation and then a monsoon, as some places describe, came through. And they continued to have the graduation. And it is like pouring. It is like there's video cameras that you can like hardly see what's going on because it's raining so hard.
Yeah.
These kids are like walking up, grabbing their paper, graduation, diplomas.
Diploma, holders and stuff. Yeah.
Man, you were telling me something kind of interesting about this, Kelly, that I hadn't seen mentioned. You want to tell me about that?
So there's two factions here. There's this obvious faction that says the school district screwed this up. Why didn't they put this inside? Why didn't they have contingency plans? Yada, yada, yada. They ruined the graduation. Grandma and grandpa couldn't sit out in that weather, all of that stuff, right? But there's actually a significant portion of that graduating class that thought this was fantastic. The parents thought it was great. The kids thought it was such a unique experience to be graduating outdoors in this monsoon that it'd be something they're going to remember forever. And so, there's these two groups, and it's funny because, when I first saw it, I go, oh my gosh, why did they not have a contingency plan here? They did. They absolutely did. This is my problem with a decision matrix, right? Is that they had a contingency plan, and at some point in every plan, whether you realize it or not, there is a go, no-go line that you cross, right? And so there was a decision made at some point to say, nope, we're having it. But they had seen and been warned about the weather coming, and they kept up to date on what was happening. And at some point, they got information that it was expected that the storm was going to go north of them or south of them. It was going to pass by and not really impact them. And so they looked at the weather and said, we're going to do it. And luckily, there was no reports of lightning strikes, right? I get back to luckily.
Yeah.
If you're familiar with this type of weather and what happens in this area of the country, let's say it that way, is lightning can pop up anytime, especially when you're expected to have monsoon type weather, thunderstorms, whatever you want to call them. And there was a decision, let's roll the dice here. The problem is that regardless of how many people said this was fantastic, this was such a unique experience, there's a significant number of people who missed out on their graduation.
Right, because some of them didn't even, they saw what was happening, they left.
They said, this is not good for us, but they continued with it as opposed to saying, hey, we got to stop this, let's move on. And I'm not going to say they put people at risk, but there was a risk there that it could have gone bad. And when we've talked about after action reviews, and this is one of those incidences that should absolutely be reviewed and see if this was in fact the right decision and that they should have let it go on, or is this something that they should have stopped and looked at up-to-date radar, up-to-date weather reports, and said, we're going to move this inside. Sorry for the inconvenience of getting everybody out here, but in the interest of safety and just having a great experience for everyone, we are going to call this. And it gets to that question, did we do it correctly or did we get lucky? Sure, there was no injuries, there was no what have you, tragedy, there wasn't any nearby lightning strikes. But is that because they made the right decision, or is that because they got lucky? And whoever wants to answer that question, feel free to do so. I wasn't there. I don't have all the details, but you can't justify the correctness of an operation because somebody liked it. Emotions and unique experiences is not necessarily part of the measure by which we measure success of an operation. And a graduation event is an operation, right? So
good way to look at it.
So we have to look at, am I happy that nothing happened? Absolutely. Is it going to be a unique experience that people will remember for the rest of their lives? Yes. Is that fun? Yes. But is that the way that it actually should have happened? Probably not.
Yeah. It was fun for some, not so much for a lot of people.
Yep.
All right. So then I want to move on to a positive article here, and I'm going to just bring this over. So
we like positive.
We do like positive. Sometimes positive is hard to find, I'll be honest. This is really interesting. So this looks like it's a middle school. So last year they had kind of looks like they had a record of 100 plus fights. And then this year they got that number down to single digits. So it's like, wow, that's pretty impressive. So what did they do differently? So reading through this article, it looks like the principal and a small group of, her staff members will actually meet up every single morning and kind of just run through like a question of like, hey, is there anything we need to be concerned about today? What are some safety things we need to look out for? What's this, particular student looking like? He had some issue yesterday, something like that, right? So it's like they have this morning huddle every single morning. And that seems to be like a big key factor in helping them get these numbers down of fights in the last year. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah. So I know you're going to cringe when I say this, but this is left a bang.
Yep.
Right? This is absolutely left a bang. I don't know how many schools do this. I think every school should do this. I think every organization that has concerns about the safety of their employees, and in many cases in industry, this is required by law that they have a safety briefing every morning at the sheriff's department, and practically, I can't say every law enforcement agency, but I'm going to say the vast majority, up at the mid 90% has a shift change briefing. So they have a briefing before every shift, and they're looking at what are the trends, what arrests were made, did we have any significant issues that need addressing or could potentially cause us to revisit them in the next shift, et cetera, right? Schools are no different. So-and-so had a bad day. I mean, you go back to my favorite little guy, the 11-year-old who was designated as the most dangerous student in my district. And you have to, if you have somebody like that you feel like you have to keep integrated into your school, I would argue that you don't necessarily have to. But if you feel like you have to for whatever reason, then that's a student you need to monitor very closely. And you need to discuss that on a daily basis. How's so-and-so doing? What's his trend? Is he trending towards violence, or is he trending towards positive behaviors? If he's going one way or the other, how do we either keep it going because it's positive, or how do we keep it from happening because he's trending in the negative direction. And how do we address it? If we had a significant, and this happened a lot to us, is in the springtime, we got a lot of fights. Is just springtime and kids. I don't know exactly what there's got to be a psychological phenomenon there, but we started seeing upticks in fights every spring, especially right after spring break. And so having the ability to sit back and saying, okay, we've had this go on. We need to watch this. We need to address this. Remind everybody, hey, we're watching, we're introducing ourselves. We're saying hi to as many kids as we possibly can. We want to assess them to make sure that there's no baseline change in their behavior. And we want to make sure that sort of positive interaction, we have that exchange as many times as we can every morning, because that may be the difference between a good day and a bad day. I applaud the principal there in saying, look, we're going to meet every day. We're going to talk about this and we're going to address things that need to be addressed.
So
good.
I was
good on her.
I was reading further through this, and so another part of this, which seems to be an interesting, probably key part of this, is, and it's gonna make you laugh because you're instantly gonna correlate this to a very popular movie and set of movies or books. And I started out with books. So inside this school entrance, they have a display, and the display shows 4 student houses. So the students are put into one of 4 houses. Is this sounding familiar?
All right.
Yeah.
Do they have a sorting hat?
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. But it's like, one is about like giving and empowering others. Other one valuing friendship. Another one promotes courage. Another one is celebrates dreamers and idealists. And like when you're in these different houses, you're rewarded points for positive behaviors, which includes safety, accountability, being organized, being respectful. So it's like, have all these positive reinforcement mechanisms.
So
what do you think about that?
Let me ask you some clarifying questions, or questions, I don't know which. So sure. Are they assigned permanently to a house?
Oh, I don't know. I was looking for that too.
So,
because that was one thing I was thinking. I was like, man, wouldn't having 4 separate things? Aren't you like kind of like
so that's my
segregating
question, right?
people into different categories?
Right. You're making them choose, or they're being chosen to. Let's say the sorting hat comes out, right, and that you're going to be in a certain type of environment. Now they're not all. I think they're all positive, right, for the most part.
Yeah.
But if you focus on 3 or 4 core issues in each house, then you're doing one of 2 things: either segregating or isolating somebody from the other behaviors, or you're expecting the others to teach through this exposure, these other houses, to sort of propagate that for you. So either one may not necessarily, I don't know how the whole program is started, but I will say this, and I believe it's the University of, I think it's UCSD, the University of California at San Diego, who does this. They put you in a house, but it's designed to have so that kids don't feel isolated. They have support systems. They have kids that have similar interests and so forth. But this is with adults at a large institution, and they have ways of doing that. It's not necessarily to segregate, but to put people with similar interests together, which ends up segregating people from exposure to other things. I saw an interesting story about how when you're isolated and you get one viewpoint, or you're always in a situation where people are of like mind are influencing what you do. So you're not getting exposed to other issues and or other perspectives, I should say. So there's a danger of doing that as well. We've talked a little offline about this, so I'm not going to go into it too much because it's pretty political. But the idea of, I'll come at it from this perspective. Oftentimes, when we segregate prisoners in jail, we spread out the population. So you don't have one gang in a unit, you spread them out so that they have to get along. There's no power. There's no power struggle. There's always a power struggle, but it reduces it if you don't have a cell block that's completely controlled by one gang, because there's different perspectives and there's no power there. So it can be dangerous if we segregate people and put all of the like-minded people together. It could be detrimental, I should say. But if they're rotated in through and out throughout these houses, or they're exposed to these houses, by all means, if it's working for them, you just got to be mindful of that. The more significant is when you're trying to promote positive behaviors, which is always good. Again, you're still working on the left side, right? The left side of bang, and you're still in that prevention mode by trying to teach kids to be responsible, and it's working for them. It seems that they've reduced it at minimum 90%, because you got to get into the single digits. So you're at 91%. So that's huge. Good for them.
Yeah. Cool stuff. So then we'll talk about the thing that you want to talk about, Kelly. Drones. Drones are so cool, though. I mean, come on.
They are. Yeah.
So what?
So
Florida and Georgia have funding for schools to basically purchase drones for the purpose of like being the first
intervention.
First thing in there to
intervention.
Active shooter intervention. Which one of the people who own this drone company made some quote that I find interesting. I kind of want to dissect it a little bit.
Sure.
You want to hear about it now?
Well, you want to get the foundation of my concern about these, or do you want to address your?
Yeah. So I'll remember it. Do you like drones, Kelly, or do you not like drones?
I have zero problems with drones. I have zero problems with drones. The problem is that one article said that they are receiving funding of $500,000 to put these drones into a few different schools. The issue that I have is we are still having issues with schools providing the basics for school safety, the very basic. And a school that receives $500,000 to help them secure their buildings and get training and do exercises, all of these things that have to be done before that, they're still missing out on the basics. And yet we're getting into this high-tech technology that is still unproven. Now, they're going to say, nope, foolproof, whatever. Let me explain it. If you have, and I see this all of the time, if you have concern about whether or not your teachers can correctly press a panic button and not have a single false alarm or mistaken activation. When I say mistaken, it was activated for something that it wasn't meant to be activated for, but it was activated on purpose, right? Mm-hmm. And if that is your biggest concern, wait until you have your first false activation of a drone that flies through your school's halls and hits some student with a rubber or plastic projectile, right?
I already know where that's going to go.
Right?
That's an easy one.
I'm just saying, if you think that is not going to happen, you're mistaken. Yeah. We already know, with as much technology as out there, and I will argue in a different way here, but there's a distinction. We already know that we have had false positives on gun detection, weapon detection, right? Where people have gone through and trained AI to hit all of these different types of weapons. They're working at adding AI to discern specific behaviors, not an inanimate object. And I've heard over and over again how great this technology is, and we've trained it in it. We're not going to get a false positive. We've gotten them.
Yeah.
Right? I don't have a problem with that false positive with gun detection, because even if it's false, the action is not unleashing something that's going to shoot something at somebody. And once that projectile leaves the barrel of the launcher. You can't control where it goes. You can't control the actions between the target and the path of that projectile. So, and if you have I don't know if there's any safeguards there, but I'm saying that the ones that I've seen have said they're there within 15 seconds. They're launched and on scene within 15 seconds, which on the face value says, that's crazy. That's great until you have something go wrong. And so you have this action that is likely to potentially harm somebody, and versus somebody pointing somebody in the direction to go figure it out.
So they say 15 seconds, but 15 seconds of what?
What do you mean?
Like, where are you going with that? What's the trigger? Sure, like once you press the button, the drones will deploy in 15 seconds. But what's causing the person to press the button in the first place? That's what I want to know.
Well, I think they launch automatically. I could be wrong there.
No, but like, so what's happening for them to decide press the button? Is it that they see a gun, or is it when shots are already fired?
Well, I think it's both, actually, right? So I think there's shot detection, and I think that there's a weapons detection, a gun detection. So shot detection and weapons detection. I think they both send it. But when you get to, I think where you're going at with your question is it's after the fact. So we just got done talking about the efforts on the left and how that is proving to significantly reduce the number of violent acts within a school. And when I say violence, I'm talking about fighting. Fighting is a level, it's a low level, most usually, a low level of violence, but it's violence. And so they're addressing that first. If we spent more money to train and have programs that reduce violence on your campus by 91%, then you think that's where we would be. But again, we're at where we have the drone side of it, and I'm sure CEO of that company would love to sit down and talk with me. But again, we're looking at response. We're looking at a response, but
we need response, right? Like we can't just not have response.
That's right. But you need both, right? And we always look at, and we always have these people that argue, well, how do I stop this guy, right? You prevent him from doing it. How? It takes effort. You know what effort it takes? It takes a principal to tell their staff, we're going to meet every morning at 6:30 in the morning, and we're going to discuss what's going on in the day. We're going to set a posture. We are going to start looking for problems before they exist. And once we find those problems, that we're going to address them. That's what that takes. Now, do we have to have a response plan? Absolutely. Because we know we can't prevent everything. We know that. So we have to have that. But we are putting hundreds of millions of dollars into response. Panic buttons. We're on the verge of having a federal law around panic buttons that does very little to address the prevention side of it. You know why? Because it's easy to press a panic button. It's difficult to put in the effort required to prevent, right? And so when we look at where our money should be going, I'm going to just make a guesstimate. We should probably, in all reality, have 70% of that money-ish headed to the prevention side and 30% to the response side.
Yeah, because you got response and then recovery.
Yeah. But we're doing it the opposite.
Yeah.
We're trying to put these things in, and this is part of my book of why marketing kills everything. We've convinced people that this is what you need to be safe.
Ruins everything, it kills everything. Man.
Did I say kills? I meant ruin. I didn't say kills everything, but ruins everything.
That's great.
And it's because we've got people to believe, and we have this narrative, if you can do this, you're safe. If you have a security director who says, I need a panic button to be safe. I need drones flying through my hallway to be safe. And they're not doing any of the other stuff, you need to get rid of that security director. That's not that. As a security director, Our job is to provide an environment where we are capable of preventing everything from understanding that we are likely not going to be 100% successful. So we have to have this contingency plan. And we have to have a contingency plan that we're willing to pull the trigger on. But you have to know when to do it. And I'll go back to the Tennessee graduation. And they had a contingency plan and they chose not to enact it. At some point, somebody's got to say, you know what? It might be too late to have graduation today, but let's either postpone this because of the potential risk until tomorrow, or it's significant enough that we need to move it inside. So how long would it take us to move everything inside? Probably longer than they had because it looked like it was at night. It might have just been how dark it was because of the rain, but It looked like it was at night. So obviously it would take longer to do that and probably cost them some money, but they probably should have postponed it to either the next day or moved it inside for the next day before everyone had to run for cover. And so I go back, I had a riot when I was a lieutenant at the sheriff's department, and we had a contingency plan for this, for civil unrest. Before every major event, and we had 2 significant ones every year that always caused us problems. We had training for civil disobedience and crowd control. Before each one, we had training. It was expensive. The problem was that we'd been doing that for 20 some odd years. Well, at the time, it was probably 30 years, 20 years that I'd been involved with it, and nothing ever happened. So the leadership never thought anything would happen until it happened. And then all of a sudden, they were stuck because they were training all of the line staff how to respond, but they didn't train themselves how to respond. So leadership failed when I kept asking, okay, what's your plan? What's your plan? They didn't know what to do because they never trained it, because they didn't believe it would ever happen. So if we're in that same boat, if we don't train our leadership to make those decisions and to initiate a contingency plan, plan B, then we're going to have things like this happen. And so I'll get off my soapbox because we got away from the drones. But do I think that you shouldn't have them? No. If you're going to have them, that's a choice you need to make. But if you're going to have them, do everything else first.
Yeah.
We have schools that are wide open that are looking and considering drones. We had, like I was telling you in pre-production, I went to a safety summit in Georgia, coincidentally, and I got to listen to one of the state legislators. I forget what side of the aisle or what side of the house, whether it was the House or Senate there, don't know. But he was highly involved in school safety, and good on him. And he was working to provide significant money to the schools, and they were, compared to a lot of other states, they were significantly higher in funding school safety. And I had, shortly before that, I had been exposed to this technology of the drones coming in. And at the end of his things, he said, now let me talk about the future of school safety. And he brought up these drones. And he says, this is this. And I'm thinking to myself, this is not the future. This is another technology that people are it's going to solve their problem for them. Right? So we get into this sort of philosophical debate of, you would much rather rely on for lack of a better description, a robot to run through your halls, fly through your halls, and address a active shooter with projectiles. I don't care that it's fired out of a gun or a CO2 propelled projectile. It's a projectile at somebody, than you would putting professional law enforcement in your building. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's a discussion, a philosophical discussion you have to have. And I think there's many more things that we could spend our money on first. I'm not saying don't buy, because I've put together a plan, what it would look like if I had all the money, right? I've put that document together for myself than anything else. And I put drones as part of that, but intelligence gathering, not direct action drones. And I will tell you this, when I when I was in the sheriff's department, I was an advocate for drones for many reasons in a law enforcement setting. But the biggest political concern was about the drones was whether or not we were going to weaponize the drones, right? So, because there at the time there was this big concern about the militarization of our law enforcement, right? They look like the army coming in, and I always argued that, well, we wouldn't if we didn't need to,
Yeah.
right? If
Times have changed.
right, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
And so when you look at the shift in what people are talking about today is not only talking about weaponizing drones, but weaponizing drones in your schools. That's a huge philosophical shift. I was talking frequently to people, groups, about we are not going to weaponize these things. There is under no circumstance are we going to weaponize drones and send them to do. I was wrong.
Yeah.
I was wrong. There are likely drones out there that are not only shooting less lethal, or that are likely shooting lethal weapons at suspect barricaded or people who are shooting from an elevated position, from a sniper's position or something.
Yeah, I mean the military's been doing that for years. Why not
Years.
have it in a school?
Well, other than the fact that what they're doing it with, that technology costs millions and millions of dollars. And they have a use case that is likely more probable to occur. And not only that, you have the millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars for these drones. You also have highly qualified and highly trained people on the other end of it. So who's going to be your drone pilot at Washington Elementary School?
Well, in the article that I was reading, at least one particular company, it's someone from the company that's going to be piloting this drone.
From where?
Well, that's a good question, right?
How far away is this guy? Right.
And then it's like, how does this guy know how to navigate your school? That's my other question. Like, do they practice? Do they do a few trial runs?
You would think they would, right? So what's
the questions just keep stacking and stacking, and as I question it more, it just sounds more and more risky to me.
Right. So let me ask you this question. So we are going to hire a service that has a drone pilot who is monitoring the school. Just let's just talk through this. And I'm going to admit I don't know this, but let's just talk through this. Mm-hmm. So one of two things is happening. That pilot, if you're going to say that drone can be on site in 15 seconds, that means that drone is there, ready to be deployed. Mm-hmm. If that's the case, and you're going to have a pilot on scene, you're paying somebody to sit there like this, every day of the school year, waiting for something that, in all probability, isn't going to happen today, but just in case, right? Or, which seems more probable to me, is you're going to have somebody whose remote gets triggered, Wally the Wonder drone flies, and then you're going to have some guy sitting there, whether he's shooting it or it shoots automatically, I don't know, but like a video game. And yet you won't put a video system in that is monitored for everything by humans because it's too expensive. You don't have people. One of the challenges for AI is behaviors. They're working on it, and they're probably getting closer. There are companies that say they can detect aggressive behaviors, but the visual of 5 teenage boys in middle school wrestling and playing around is not that far different from those kids actually fighting. But you're not going to have somebody that says, hey, looks like we have a fight over in this hallway. Can I get some staff over there? We're not going to do that. We're going to hire a guy that is a drone pilot from, we're assuming, remotely. That way he can monitor several different schools. And while this is highly unlikely, do they have enough pilots to address whatever's going on? If you have remote, and if you're a business that wants to expand and Do you have enough pilots to handle every situation that might occur simultaneously? I don't know. Those are questions I can't answer. But if you have two things go off at the same time, do you have enough pilots to handle two separate things? What happens if you get a swatting call and you have your entire district on lockdown? If the lockdown is the trigger for the launch, where are you sending that to?
That happened in my area, where like a bunch of schools, a bunch of buildings within a school went on lockdown, and it was
it just happened
very chaotic.
Not too long ago. Yeah, it happened not too long ago. Actually, I think to one of our districts, but I don't remember which one. But it's crazy. And so if I was a drone company, I'd also look at what other environments can I work in, right? Are we just going to stick to the hallways of the schools, or are we going to work at dances? Are we going to work at basketball games? Are we going to work in football games at an outdoor stadium, track meets? How are we? Are we only going to protect those kids inside the classroom, inside the building? And what happens if so let me run this just as a hypothetical question, right? So if we are doing what is considered best practice, is we are locking our every class, what happens if we have a Uvalde incident where the shooter is in the class? Well, people are going to say, well, that's what law enforcement does. Okay, that's great. But you're pressing first of all, you're spending a bunch of money saying this can be on site in 15 seconds. Can't get through a locked door.
Yeah. It can get through a window, maybe.
Maybe if
maybe
it's open,
going outside and it's going just kamikazing through the window.
But at some point, you've got to find access to wherever it is. And if you've seen a school, hallways are open, nothing else is.
Yeah.
Right. So now the assumption comes in: is it covering those areas where you're likely going to happen? So your assumption is that it's going to happen in the hallway, in an open area. And so logically you would say, well, that's where the most people are, but and if that's where the most people are, that's where the goal of an active shooter is typically body count, right? And so you have to go where the most people are. And what about lunchtime in the cafeteria?
Yeah.
What about an assembly? What about just classrooms, your basic day-to-day class? Because I will tell you, and this was evident in Uvalde, if you're acknowledging the goal of an active shooter, the ultimate goal of an active shooter, it's more likely that they will be successful if they have a concentration of people who can't move than it is a hallway full of kids, because they can move. And if you look at the quote from World War Z, those who move live, those who don't die. This is the whole premise of that decisive moment when we're talking about denial, deliberation. Decisive moment is taking action to protect yourself. So this could have been a whole different story if we were talking about the incident in the Georgia high school a couple of years ago. If that shooter didn't leave and opened up in that classroom, whole completely different story. That's not, I think that what I'm trying to get to is, I think once you start looking at the technology, I think there's probably limitations to it, and make those considerations, ask those questions when you start spending $500,000 to put this technology in your deal. Yeah, there's other technology out there that is like, I told you, I talked to a company that does, that what they wanted to do was make, let's say, the cafeteria, one of the large spaces, as a safe room. So the idea for the company was they wanted to evacuate everybody to this large safe room so that everyone could be safe in this area. And I talked to him, and he says, this is such a great idea. This is going to be, and I said, it's not a great idea. And he goes, what do you mean? I said, you're assuming that you can get everyone there.
Yeah.
You might be able to get some people there, but if you can't, and you trained people that this is your refuge is in the cafeteria, get to the cafeteria at all costs. there's going to be a high price to pay there because people are going to they're going to go into the line of fire, or by design, you're making them potentially run into the line of fire to get to the cafeteria. And as opposed to getting into a safe place.
Yeah.
And he says, well, we're trying to compartmentalize. I says, well, you're better off compartmentalizing the hallways so that you restrict the movement. But as soon as you do that, you start closing off access from one section of the hallway to the other. You're leaving the potential shooter in an area that you have segregated. So everyone that got stuck there is now a target. You're limiting their ability to move, to get out of there. When you have run, hide, fight, you're limiting their ability to run. So those are considerations that we should have more of, discussions that we should have more of before we start spending $500,000 on attack drones.
If you enjoyed today's episode, please like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. And if you have any questions about what we discussed, leave a comment on our website at crisisgo.com. Thank you for joining us today, and we'll see you next time on Coffee with Kelly, a discussion on school safety.